Welcome to our channel. Here we publish free of charge the most useful and interesting books every week. Subscribe to the channel and click on the bell so as not to miss the next videos. Good listening. Father Rich, Father Poor. What rich people teach their children about money and what do not. Do poor and middle-class people. By Robert T. Kiyosaki. Read by Jerome Corrette. This book is dedicated to all parents of the world, because they are for their children the first and most important pedagogues, and also to all those who educate, influence, and guide by example. Thank you. How a person can say thank you to everyone when there are so many people to thank. Obviously, by this book, I want to say thank you to my two fathers, who represented in my life two powerful models to imitate, and to my mother, who taught me the love and the benevolence of more. Among the people who collaborated very closely in the realization of this book, I include my wife Kim, who knows so well how to fill me. Kim is my partner in the marriage, in business, and in life. A retrospective 20. Today the Beatles launched their album Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band on June 1st, 1967, favorably received by the critics. He immediately knew a huge commercial success, appearing on the top of the list of the best albums for 27 weeks in the United Kingdom and 15 weeks in the United States. Time magazine called Sgt. Pepper Decisive Moments in the History of Music. The album won 4 GR in 1968 and was named Album of the Year, the first rock album to receive this honor. Rich Father Poor appeared 20 years ago on my 50th birthday on April 8, 1997. Unlike the Beatles album, the book did not have an immediate commercial success. It was not praised by the critics. In fact, it was rather the opposite. Father Poor Father was first published on account of author because all the publishers to whom I have submitted my man refused it. Some refusal notes would have comments so, "You don't know what you are talking about." I found that the majority of publishers resemble my very educated poor father more than my rich father. The majority of publishers did not agree with the lessons of my rich father, just as my poor father 20 years ago. Today, in 1987, Poor Father was a warning, a collection of lessons about the future 20 years later. Millions of people all over the world are more aware of the bed's custody of my rich father and his lessons about the future with hindsight. Many call these lessons prophetic of prediction that have come true. Here are some of these lessons. Number 1 of my rich father. The rich do not work for money. 20 years ago, some publishers refused my manuscript because they did not agree with my rich father's first lesson. Today, people are more aware of the gap that keeps growing between the NTIS assets and the rest of the population. Between 1993 and 2010, more than 50% of the national income in the States. The U.S. has been in the pockets of only 1% of the country's inhabitants, since the situation has only worsened. Economists at the University of California have revealed that 95% of the income generated between 2009 and 2012 has also been pocketed by that same 1% of well-off. The lesson is that it is entrepreneurs and investors who benefit from its ever higher income, and not the employees, those people who work for money. The sound of my rich father, savers are losers 20 years ago. Most publishers have vehemently stood up against this. Lesson from my rich father to the poor and middle class: saving is a religion. They see what will lift them out of poverty and protect them from a cruel world. For many individuals, compare savers to losers is sacrilegious. Lesson: a picture is worth 1,000 words. Just take a look at the graph showing the evolution of the Dow Jones Index over a 120-year period, and you will understand why and how savers became losers. The graph shows that there were 3 big cracks in the first 10 years of this new century. The first crack, that the Societes.com one, happened in 2000. The second and third are the real estate crisis of 2007 and the banking crisis of 2008. The monstrous crack of 1929. When we compare the first three cracks of the 21st century to the big crack of 1929, we have a better idea of the magnitude of this. We are actuating the printing press. After the big crack, the U.S. government and the Federal Reserve have been commenting on printing money to the rescue of the rich. Between the years 2000 and 2010, under the pretext of saving the economy, the banks of the whole world have reduced interest rates and printed money while our leaders wanted us to believe that they were saving the world. It is in reality the rich who were saving themselves and throwing out the poor and the middle class. Nowadays, in many countries, interest rates are below zero. And that is why the savers are losing today. The biggest losers are the poor and the middle class, those people who work for money and who save the sound of my rich father. Your house is not an asset. 20 years ago, in 1997, all the publishers who sent me a rejection note criticized this lesson from my rich father, that our house is not an asset. 10 years later, in 2007, people who had taken out subprime mortgages started to have problems with repayment. The housing bubble burst, and millions of homeowners understood the hard truth of this lesson. Their house was not an asset. The real problem: most people don't know that the real estate case is not really one. The poor did not cause the real estate crack. It is the rich who did it. What the rich did was create structured financial instruments called derivatives of the products that Warren Buffett called financial weapons of mass destruction. When these weapons started to explode, the housing market collapsed, and the blame was thrown on the poor and mortgage borrowers. In 2007, the value of these financial derivatives was estimated at $700 trillion. Today, their value is estimated at 1.2 quadrillion. So the real problem only made bigger. Nothing was solved. Lesson from my rich father: why the rich pay less taxes. 20 years ago, the publishers criticized the rich father poor because I revealed how and why the rich pay less. One of them even claimed that this lesson was illegal. 10 years later, in 2007, President Barack Obama bridgetates a second term before his opponent, Governor Mitt Romney. When it was known that President Barack Obama was paying taxes about 30% of his income, and that Governor Romney was only reversing 13% of Romney's campaign on a downward slope that would cost him the presidency. And again, taxes were at the center of the U.S. presidential campaign, 2016. Instead of trying to figure out why people like Mitt Romney and President Donald Trump are legally paying less taxes, the poor and the middle class are getting angry, even though President Trump is promising to cut the tax rate for the poor and the middle class. The reality is that the rich will always pay less taxes, and this brings us back to lesson number 1 of my rich father. Rich don't work for money. As long as an individual works for money, he's paying taxes. But when candidate Hillary Clinton promised to raise the tax rate for the rich, she was only talking about people who work for money, receive high salaries, medical actors and lawyer, and not the ultra-rich 20 years ago. Although Rich Father Poor did not have an immediate damage success like the album Sir John Paper of the Beatles, he registered on the bestsellers list of the New York Times in 2000, and he stayed there for almost 7 years. And still, in 2000, Oprah Winfrey contacted me. She invited me to his show. I spent an entire hour on his set, and as we say, the rest belongs to the story. Rich Father Poor became the bestseller #1 in personal finance sales of the series. Rich Father are estimated to be nearly 40 million copies worldwide. My rich father, did it really exist? Millions of people asked me. Your rich father, did it really exist? To answer this question, you can listen to the story of Mike, his son, during his visit to the program, Rich Dad Radio Show. You will have access to it in English by going to richdadradio.com, the University of Rich Father. Rich Father Poor was written in as simple a form as possible so that almost everyone can understand the lessons of my rich father. For those who wish to learn more, I wrote in the framework of this 20th anniversary financiation presents in more detail the teachings of my father, rich in money and investment. Rich Richer is the rich father, poor father of the graduate students. It is their university, a warning and an invitation. Even though I tried to simplify my remarks in why rich are getting richer, what the rich really do is not simple and easy to explain. To understand what the rich really do, it needs to have a real financial education, an education that is not offered in school. I suggest you start by reading of Father Rich Poor, and then if you want to learn more, to continue with Why Rich to Get Richer. Thank you for these 20 wonderful years, to all our readers of past and future. Thank you for these 20 wonderful years. Our mission is to increase the financial well-being of mankind, and it starts with a life, in one person at a time. Remember to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the new book's introduction. Father Rich Poor, having two pairs to advise me, gave me the opportunity to choose between points of view opposing those of a rich man and those of a poor man. I had two pairs, one rich and the other poor. One was very educated and very intelligent. He was holder of a doctorate and had completed 4 years of studies in less than 2 years. He went on to attend Stanford University, the University of Chicago, and Northwestern University to pursue further higher education at full cost, thanks to the scholarships he deserved. The other father did not even finish his 8th year. Both men had success in their careers, working hard all their lives. Both earned substantial incomes, and yet one of them still struggled financially. The other became one of the richest men in Hawaii. One died leaving tens of millions of dollars to his family, to charities, and his church, the other leaving debts to repay. These two men were strong, charismatic, who both influence me, give advice, but not on the same subjects. The two men strongly believed in education, but they did not recommend me the same program of study. If I had only one father, I would have to accept or reject his advice. Having two peers to advise me gave me the opportunity to choose between opposing points of view, those of a rich man and those of a poor man. Instead of simply accepting or rejecting the points of view of one or the other, I found myself thinking more about para, then choosing for myself. Yet there was a small problem. The rich man was not yet rich, and the poor man had not yet become rich. Both had just started their career, and both had difficulty with family and monetary issues. But they had very different opinions regarding money. For example, one of my fathers said, "The love of money and the root of all the words." The other affirmed without a shadow of a doubt, "The lack of money and the root of all the words." When I was young, it was difficult for me to be influenced by two pairs with strong personality. I wanted to be a good boy and listen to them, but my two fathers did not say the same things. Their conflicting opinions, especially with regard to money, was so drastic that I became more and more interested and intrigued. I began to think for long periods about what each of them told me. I spent most of my free time meditating to ask me questions like this: why? So he said that, and then I wondered, myself, the same question about a statement of my other father. It would have been much easier to just say, yes, he is right, I agree with his position, or to simply reject this point by saying, he really does not know what he's talking about. Having two peers that I loved forced me to think and ultimately choose my own way of thinking, choosing by myself to know a much more profitable process in the long run, instead of simply accepting or rejecting a single point of view. One of the reasons why the rich get richer, the poor get poorer still more, and the middle class is caught up with debts, and that the issue of money is inculcated at home, but not in school. Most of us learn from their parents the basics of money, but what can a poor parent say to his child about money? Says, don't drop out of school and study the best you can. It may be that the child gets a degree with excellent marks, but he may inherit a poor mentality and conditioning. Unfortunately, We don't teach to cut money in schools. Educational institutions focus on academic and professional skills and not financial skills. That explains why bankers, doctors, and intelligent accountants who have excellent marks in school struggle all their lives financially. Our astronomical national debt is due in large part to highly educated politicians and to government officials who make financial decisions with little or no training in this area. 20 years ago today, the debt clock has passed 20 years, and the national debt of the United States is more than staggering when it comes to press. It was close to $20 trillion with a capital B. I often wonder what will happen when millions of people need financial and medical assistance. They will have to depend on their families or the government for financial support. What will happen when medical insurance for the elderly and Social Security do not more money in their trunk? How will the nation survive if parents continue to enlighten their children on the money issues? Which parents will become or are already poor? Given that I had two pairs that influenced me, I learned from each pair. I had to think about the advice of each pair, and in doing so, allowed me to better understand the power and the effect of our own thoughts on our life. For example, one of my fathers used to say, "I can't afford to buy that." The other father refused that I use such words. He incited me, rather, to say, "How can I afford to buy this?" One of these sentences is an assertion and the other one, question. One does not oblige you to anything, and the other one obliges you to think about my fathers, who would soon become rich. Explain to me that the fact of saying, without thinking about the next sentence, "I cannot afford to buy this," makes the brain stop looking. By asking the question, "How can I afford to buy this?" your brain gets going. It did not encourage me to buy me everything I wanted. It was almost fanatical when it came to training his mind. This most powerful computer in the world, my brain, gets stronger every day because I exercise it. The more powerful it becomes, the more money I can make it. He believed that saying without thinking, "I can't afford to buy this," was a sign of intellectual laziness. Even though my two fathers were working hard, I noticed that one of them had gotten used to sleeping his brain when it came to finances, while the other was exercising his long-term result. One of my fathers became financially stronger and the other weaker. It doesn't differ so much from a person who regularly goes to the gym to train, as opposed to another who sits on the bench, his couch, watching TV. Proper physical exercises increase your chances of good health, and proper mental exercises increase your chances of being rich. But father had two opposing ways of thinking, and this was reflected in their approach to reality. One of them believed that the rich should pay more taxes to take care of less fortunate beings. The other said taxes punish those who produce and reward those who do not produce. One of my fathers made me the following recommendation: study hard to work in a good company. The other gave me this advice: studied hard to find a good company to buy. One of my fathers may, "The reason why I'm not rich is that you're there, the kids." The other said, "The reason why I have to get rich is that you're there, the kids." One of them encouraged us to talk about money and business at the family table. The other prohibited us to talk about money during meals. One said, "When it comes to money, not playing with fire does not take a risk." The other claimed, "Learn to manage risks." One believed our house is our most important investment, our biggest asset. The other believed, "My house is impassive, and if your house and your most important investment, you are struggling." But two pairs paid their bills before due date, even though one of them paid them before the other. Blinn believed that a company or the government could take care of you and your needs. He was always concerned about salary increases, pension plans, medical benefits, sick leave, holidays, and other benefits. He was impressed by two of his uncles who had enrolled in the army and who had earned a pension and allowance after 20 years of active service. He liked the idea of medical benefits and privileges that the military cooperative provided to its retirees. He also appreciated the system of permanent positions that one finds in a university. The idea of a protected position for life and the benefits that come with it seemed more important than the job itself. He frequently said, "I worked hard for the government, and I am entitled to its benefits." The other one believed in total financial independence. He spoke against a certain mentality that demanded mandatory allowances because he was aware of how this measure created people weak and financially pitiful. He insisted on the fact that you had to be financially competent 20 years ago. Today, your house is not an asset. The real estate crack of 2008 delivered a clear message. Your house is not an asset. Not only doesn't put money in your pocket, but you can't count on the fact that its value will increase today in 2017. Many homes have a lower value than they had in 2007. One of my fathers struggled to save a few dollars. The other simply created investments. One taught me how to write an impressive resume so I can find a good job. The other taught me how to write solid financial and business projects so I can create jobs. The fact of being the product of two influential pairs gave me the luxury of being able to see all the effects that different thoughts can have on our life. I noticed that people really shape their life by means of their thoughts. For example, my poor father always said I would never be rich, and this prophecy was realized. On the other hand, my rich father always spoke of himself as someone rich. He said things like this: "I am a rich man, and rich people do not do this." Even when he was wrong, like wheat, after a major financial disaster, he continued to consider himself a rich man. He justified himself by saying, "There is a difference between being poor and being penniless. When you are poor, it is forever to be without money. It is temporary." My poor father said, "I am not interested in money, or money, I don't care." My rich father said, "Money, it is power. So the power of our thoughts may never be measured or valued at its fair value." But it became obvious to me when I was still young that I had to be aware of my thoughts and of my way of expressing myself. I found that my poor father was poor, not because of the salary he earned, which was far from negligible, but because of his thoughts and his actions. Still young boy with two fathers, I became poor, extremely aware that I had to be careful about the thoughts I would choose to adopt as mine. Had to listen to my rich father or my poor father. Both men had immense respect for education and study. He differed on what was important to learn according to them. One wanted me to study fervently, that I get a degree and find a paying job. He wanted me to study to become a professional, a lawyer, an accountant, or do business studies to get a master's degree in business administration. The other encouraged me to study how to become rich, to understand how money works, and to learn how to become rich, putting money at my service. "I do not work for money." These are the words he repeated to me again and again, and the money works for me. At the age of 9, I decided to listen and learn all that my rich father had to say about money. By doing so, I choose not to listen to my poor father, even if it was him who held all the diplomas. A lesson of Robert Frost. Robert Frost is my favorite poet. Although I love many of these poems, my favorite is "The Path I Did Not Take." I put into practice the lesson of this poem almost daily. The path I did not take. Two paths that were separated from each other in a forest with yellowed leaves, and I was disappointed that I could not walk both as a single traveler. I remained for a long time still, watching one long drawn until it bifurcated in the undergrowth. Then I chose the other that seemed just as beautiful to me, and that perhaps deserved the title of trail because it was green, and I wanted to engage in it, even if the two paths had been treaded almost equally by the thousands of steps of the walkers that morning. The two paths, they lay like buried under leaves that no foot had yet stepped on, or it was then that I kept the first trail in reserve for another day. Yet knowing how one trail leads another, I strongly doubted that I would ever come back. Would have to tell this story with a sigh in my voice. Light years from here. Two trails separated from each other in a wood. and I borrowed the least frequented. And that is what made all the difference. It completely changed things. Over the years, I often thought about this poem of Robert Frost. When a resolute decision shaped the rest of my life, when I decided which of my two fathers I should listen to. My education about money started. My rich father gave me his teaching for 30 years until I reached the age of 39. He stopped teaching me after realizing that I knew and understood fully what he had tried to drive into my skull. Very often, limited money is a form of power, but financial education is more powerful still. Money comes if you are taught how money works, you gain power over money, and then you can start to create wealth. The reason why positive thinking alone cannot give desired results is that most people went to school and never learned the basics of money there, that they spend their lives working for money. Since I was only 9 years old when my teaching started, the lessons my rich father taught me were simple, all the way down to 6 essential lessons that were repeated over a period of 30 years. This book talks about these 6 lessons expressed here as simply as possible as my rich father presented them to me. The lessons are not supposed to be answers in themselves, but rather indicators, poles. These indications will help your children and yourself to enrich you. Whatever happens in this world, where uncertainty and changes are deepening. Chapter 1, Lesson 1. The rich do not work for money. The poor and the middle class work for money. The rich make money work for their father. Can you tell me how to become rich? My father closed the evening paper. Why do you want to become rich? Son, because today Jimmy's mother was driving their new Cadillac and was going the weekend in their country house. Jimmy was taking 3 of his friends, but Mike and I were not invited. Told us we were not because we are poor children. They said. It asked my father to be incredulous. Yes, they said it, retorted in a penchant. My father nodded silently, put on his glasses, and continued reading his newspaper. I stood there, waiting for an answer. We were then in 1956. I was 9 years old. By a strange twist of fate, I attended the same public school as the children of rich. The main industry of our city was sugarcane plantation managers and other influential people in the city, such as doctors, business owners, and bankers, sending their children to this elementary school. After grade 6, their children were usually sent to private schools. Since my family lived on a certain side of our street, I attended this school. If I had lived on the other side of the same street, I would have been enrolled in a different school with students from families like mine. After grade 6, and I myself had to attend public high school, there was no question of private school for them or for me. My father ended up dropping off the paper. I saw that he was thinking, and, well, my boy, started slowly. If you want to become rich, you have to learn to make money. How do we make money? Asked him. I thought, well, my boy, said smiling. What meant I would not tell you more, or I do not know the answer, does not ask me more. The formation of an association. The next morning I repeated the words of my father to my best friend Mike. To my knowledge, Mike and I were the only poor children of the school. Mike looked like me because he too attended this school. By a singular stroke of the Gesertin, someone had delineated the territory of the school sector, and we had ended up in the same establishment as the rich children. We were not really poor, but we felt like so because all the other boys had new baseball gloves, new bicycles, all they had been 9. Our parents assured our basic needs, food, housing, clothes, train, more. My father said, if you want something, work to pay you things. We wanted, but jobs were scarce for 9-year-old boys. So how should we go about making money? Asked Mike. I don't know, answer, but do you want to become my partner? And that's how this Saturday Mike became my first partner. We spent all morning making plans to enrich ourselves. At times we evoked Jimmy and the others having fun at his country house. It hurt us a bit, but a beneficial evil that stimulated us in our project to make money. Finally that afternoon, a flash of genius crossed our minds. It was an idea that Mike had drawn from a very excited science book. We exchanged a handshake, and it was the birth of our business. In the weeks following, Mike and I knocked on our doors to our neighborhood, asking our neighbors to please put aside their old tube of toothpaste. Intrigued most, adults accepted with a smile. Some wanted to know more. We replied, "Impossible to tell you, professional secret." My mother's concern grew over the weeks. We had chosen a corner near her washing machine to store our raw material in a cardboard box that had once contained bottles of ketchup. Our small supply of tube of toothpaste grew. One day my mother was tired of seeing this mound of dirty and deformed tube of toothpaste that belonged to our neighbors, ended up putting her out. "Gee, what are you boys doing? And don't talk to me about professional secrecy. Do the cleaning where I put all this in the garbage." Mike and I begged him and let us do it, explaining that we would soon have enough tube to start the production. We advised him that we were still waiting for the tubes of some neighbors who finished their toothpaste. Mom made us shy of a week. The start date of the production was pushed back. Pressure was rising. It was my first association, and a threat of eviction was already hanging over us. By the good care of my own mother, Mike was in charge of encouraging the neighbors to use their toothpaste faster, reminding them the frequent brushing recommended by the dentist. I began to set up the production line as planned. The production started a week later, when my father, accompanied by a friend, wanted to engage with his car in our driveway. He found himself in front of two 9-year-old boys operating a full production line. Everything was covered with a thin layer of white powder of small milk. Berlingot from the school was lined up on a long table, and on our grill bocce, bright red charcoals released an ardent heat. Father walked carefully towards us, having had to park the car at the bottom of the driveway, as the assembly line blocked it. The access to the car shelter. As he approached, his friend and saw him, a metal tray placed on charcoals, and in which toothpaste tubes. Melted at that time, the toothpaste was not sold in plastic tubes, but lead. Once the paint burned, the tubes thrown into the small metal tray ended up liquefying, and with the help of my mother's handles to grasp a hot object, we poured the lead through an orifice made in the top of the berlingots. The berlingot were filled with casting plaster, like the one that had spread everywhere before being mixed with it. The water in my haste, I had overturned the bag, and one would have thought that a snowstorm had descended on the region. The jerry cans were used to mold the plaster. My father and his friend watched us pour the molten lead through a small opening made in the upper part of the plaster cube. "Casting attention," said my father. I nodded yes, without looking up. Once the operation was finished, I dropped the metal tray, and I smiled to my father. "What do you do so?" the boys asked by suppressing a smile. "We follow your advice. We will be rich." "Say yes," said yes Mike, smiling and while nodding our heads in approval. "We are partners, and that contain these plaster molds?" asked my father. "Look, it should be a good batch." With a small hammer, I was giving a few blows on the seal that divided the cube in two. Carefully, I removed the top part of the plaster mold, and a lead piece of cecine so dropped. "Oh no," exclaimed my father. "You are pouring 5-cent coins with lead, exactly," said Mike. "We follow your advice, we make money." My father's friend burst out laughing. My father smiles and shakes his head. He had in front of him nearby, with a flame and a box of empty toothpaste tube, of boys covered in white powder and smiling with full teeth. He asked us to put everything down and sit with him on the steps of the stairs. With a smile, he explained nicely what the word counterfeit meant. Our dreams were falling apart. "You mean that it is illegal?" asked Mike, in a breathtaking voice. "Let them make it," say my father's friend, maybe exploiting an innate talent, Mike. Father gave him a bad look. "Yes, it is illegal," says my father softly. "But you have manifested great creativity and original spirit. Continue. I am really proud of you." Disappointed Mike and I sat silently for 20 minutes before starting to clean up all this mess. Our company closed the very day of its opening, sweeping the powder. I was looking at Mike and tell him it must be believed that Jimmy and his friends are right. We are poor. My father, who was about to leave, had heard me, the boys say. You are poor only if you capitulate. What matters most is that you have taken action. Most people stick to the words and dream of being rich. You acted. I am very proud of you. If continue, don't give up. Mike and I kept silent. It was nice words, but we weren't any further ahead. So why aren't you rich? Father asked. Because I chose to be a teacher. Teachers don't really care about becoming rich. Only teaching matters to us. I would like to help you, but I really don't. Know how to make money? Mike and I repress our cleaning. I have an idea, said my father. If you want to learn to become rich, I'm not your man. It's your father that you have to see. Mike, my father asked, Mike intrigued. Yes, your father, repeated my father, smiling. We both have the same banker, and he doesn't laugh at him. He often told me of his remarkable intelligence when it comes to making money, my father repeated, Mike, amazed. So why don't we have a beautiful view and a beautiful house like that of rich children in school? Having a beautiful car and a nice house does not necessarily mean that you are rich, or that you know how to become it, replied my father. Jimmy's father is employed in the sugar plantation. He is not very different from me. He works for a company while I am in the service of the government. His car is supplied by his employer. With the difficulties that Jimmy's father is experiencing, the plantation risks losing everything for yours. It's different, Mike. He seems to be building an empire which will make him a very rich man in a few years. It made us regain our enthusiasm. Doubling energy, we started to clean up the mess caused by the establishment of our first business. Now finishes, while cleaning us decide when and how we would talk to Mike's father. As he worked long hours and came home late, it complicated things. His father was owner of warehouse of a company building a chain of stores and 3 restaurants. It was the restaurants that held him late at work. Mike went home by bus once the cleaning was over. The same night he would talk to his father to ask him to teach us how to become rich. Mike promised to call me after talking to him, even at a late hour. The phone rang at 8:30 p.m. Okay, I said next Saturday, and I was hanging up. Mike's father agreed us an appointment Saturday morning at 7:30 a.m. I took the bus towards the poor area of the city. The lessons begin. Mike and I met his father that morning at 8 a.m. He was already working for more than an hour when I approaching the small, simple house, and fancy his foreman was just driving away in his van. Mike welcomed me at the father door is on the phone, and he prays you wait on the veranda at the back, says Mike, opening the door. The wood floor cracked when I crossed the threshold of the old house. A cheap doormat was just at the entrance. It was used to conceal. Was owner of warehouse of a company building a chain of stores and 3 restaurants. It was the restaurants that held him late at work. Mike went home by bus once the cleaning was over. The same night he would talk to his father to ask him to teach us how to become rich. Mike promised to call me after talking to him, even at a late hour. The phone rang at 8:30 p.m. Okay, I said, next Saturday, and I was hanging up. Mike's father agreed us an appointment, Saturday morning at 7:30 a.m. I took the bus towards the poor area of the city. The lessons begin. Mike and I met his father that morning at 8 a.m. He was already working for more than an hour when I approaching the small, simple house and fancy. His foreman was just driving away in his van. Mike welcomed me at the father. Door is on the phone, and he prays you wait on the veranda. At the back, says Mike, opening the door, the wood floor cracked when I crossed the threshold of the old house. A cheap doormat was just at the entrance. It was used to conceal. Near me, I asked him to show us how to make money, said Mike. And what was his answer? Asked. I was both curious and careful. And well, he first looked at me weirdly, then he said he would make us a proposal. Did I swing my chair against the wall? And I stayed so perched on the 2 back feet of the chair. Mike, Mimita, you know the proposition he wants to make us? Asked me. No, but we will soon find out. Suddenly, Mike's father broke into the veranda through a mesh door of a good mic, and me fell back on our feet, not for consideration for him, but because we had jumped. "You are ready?" the boys asked. Mike's father, approaching a chair to sit with us, we bought, while moving our chairs away from the wall to place us in front of him. He was a towering man, measuring about 1.82 and weighing about 90 kilograms. My father was taller, about the same weight, in 5 years, the eldest of Mike's father. In some way, he looked alike, although of different ethnic origin, maybe he was. Animated with the same energy Mike claims you want to learn to make money is true, Robert. I quickly made an affirmative nod, betraying some nervousness. His words and his smile showed a great strength of agreement. "Hear my proposal. I will be your teacher, but not in the traditional way. I will teach you on the condition that you work for I. Otherwise, I won't teach you a lesson. My teaching will be more effective if you work. But if you only want to listen passively, as you do in class, I am literally wasting my time here. My proposal is to take or to leave." "Ah, can I first ask a question?" "Question asked. No. Is to take or to leave. I have too much to do to waste my time. If you are unable to make quick decisions, you will never learn to make money. The opportunities that pass may never come back. It is essential to know the right time to make a decision. This is the opportunity you dream of. School starts or ends in 10 seconds, says Mike's father with a mischievous smile. "I accept, say, I agree," said Mike. "Well," said Mike's father, Mrs. Name. "Martin arrives in 10 minutes. When I'm done with her, we'll accompany her to my grocery store, and you will get to work. I will pay you 10 cents, and you will work for 3 hours every Saturday. But I have a ball game today, I say." Mike's father lowered his voice and took a firm tone. "Learn, or let it say, I accept. Answer. I choose to work and learn instead of play. They're 20 years today. The world is changing at an ever faster pace. The stock market trades are done in a few milliseconds. The trades are done on the internet in a few minutes. More and more people are fighting for the good deals, so the faster you will be able to make a decision, the faster you will have chance to seize the good opportunities before someone else does it." 37th later, from 9 a.m. that day, Mike and I worked assiduously under the orders of Mrs. Martin. She was a kind and patient woman. She always said that Mike and I remind her of her 2 sons, although nice. She believed in the virtues of work and would let us know for 3 hours. We would pull out of the canned food boxes on the shelves and marry them with a feather, and then put them back in place. It was an excruciatingly boring task. Mike's father, I called my rich father, owned 9 small grocery stores of the kind that had ample parking lot. It presaged today's convenience stores. It was actually neighborhood grocery stores where people bought items like bread, butter, and cigarettes. We were in Hawaii before the air conditioning. Air and Commerce could not keep their doors closed because of the heat. The doors at both ends of the store, on the roadside and the parking lot, had to remain wide open. Every time a car passed or entered the parking lot, the dust was rising and spreading in the store. We were assured of a job as long as there was no air conditioning. Under the supervision of Mrs. Martin, Mike and I completed for 3 weeks our 3 hours of work at noon. Our work was finished, and she was depositing 3 small 10-cent coins in Mike's hand and in mine, even though I was only 9 years old in the mid-1950s. It must be said that 30 cents wasn't a very attractive amount. Comics cost 10 cents at the time, so I usually spent my money on comics. And I went home on Wednesday of the 4th week. I was ready to give up. I had agreed to work because I wanted Mike's father to teach me how to make money. And now I had become a slave to talk. And on top of all that, I hadn't seen Mike's father since that first Saturday. Gave up saying "I, Mike" at lunchtime. School was boring, and now I hadn't seen him again. Even more, my Saturdays to rest. But it was the question of the 30 cents that hit me hardest. This time, Mike smiled. "What were you laughing at him?" I asked him with anger and frustration. "Father waited for me to have enough to a certain point," said Mike. Father is a different person. He does not teach in the same way that your father, your mother, and your father sermonize you a lot. My father is calm and speaks little. Wait only until Saturday before to give up. I would tell him that you are ready. You mean that I am a victim of a setup? Not really. But maybe father will explain it to you on Saturday. A long wait on a beautiful Saturday morning. I was ready to face Mike's father, and even my real father was angry against the of my real father. The one I call my poor father thought that my rich father was breaking the industrial legislation with regard to child labor, and that his actions had to be investigated. My poor father, highly educated, asked me to demand what I deserved, at least 25 centel. My poor father told me that if I did not get this increase, I had to give up this job immediately. Anyway, you don't need this. Bring back work, says my father, with indignation. At 8 a.m. the following Saturday morning, I walked through the door of Mike's house that his father had just opened. Sit down and wait your turn, tells me Mike's father. As I entered, he turned around and disappeared in his small office next to a bedroom. I kissed with eyes the whole room and I saw Mike nowhere. I felt a little embarrassed, and I sat with circumspection near the same two women who were there 4 weeks earlier. She smiled and packed on the couch to make room for me. 45 minutes passed, and I had become angry smoker. The two women had met Max, father, and had been away for at least 30 minutes. The older man had spent 20 minutes in the office, and he too was no longer there. The house was empty, and I was sitting in this dark living room, feeling enclosed by a beautiful sunny day, and Hawaiian, waiting to be able to talk to a miser who exploited the children. I could hear croples of paper coming from his office. He also telephoned, and what bothered me above all, I was about to leave, but for some reason I stayed. Finally, 15 minutes later, at 9 a.m. precise, Father Rich came out of his office without a word and waved me in the front hand. I understood that you want a salary increase, otherwise you leave us, said Father Rich while pivoting in his chair. And well, you did not respect our agreement. Thrown I close to tears. It was really scary for me to stand up to an adult. You told me you would teach me if I worked for you, and well, I worked for you. I worked hard. I gave up. You are a crook, and that is what everyone thinks in town. You are greedy. You want all the money for yourself, and you do not take care of your employees. You make me wait, and you show me no respect. I am only a little boy, but I deserve to be better treated. Rich father, see in his chair, by staring at me, he seemed to study me. Not so bad, said in less than 2 months. You speak like most of my employees. What did I ask? Without understanding what he said, I thought you were going to respect our agreement and teach me things. Instead, you want to torture me. It's cruel, it's really cruel. I'm teaching you at this moment, said calmly Father Rich. So taught with it a smile. But that's not how life teaches you. And I would add that life is the best teacher that exists. Most of the time, life doesn't address you directly. It pushes you and pushes you, right and left. Every push, life tells you, wake up, there is something I want you to learn. 20 years ago today, the cone of learning is Edgar Dale, who helped us understand that we learn better by acting in real life or during a simulation. We sometimes talk about learning by experience. Dale in his cone of learning. Learning tells us that reading and presentations are the last steps of learning, least effective methods of learning. And yet we all know how teaching is delivered in the majority of schools, through reading and presentations. What this man was talking about, I asked myself, according to him, life was talking to me, when it pushed me right and left by thesis. Now I was convinced that I had to give up my job. I was literally talking to an individual driven for asylum. If you learn the lessons of life, you will do very well. Otherwise, life will simply continue to shoot you from all sides. In general, people opt for 2 solutions. Some let themselves be pushed by the life, Others get angry and pushed. Others, whether it is their boss, their husband, their wives, or their work, they do not realize that it is the life that pushes them and pushes them. I had no idea what he is talking about. Life pushes us all right and left. Some abandon, others fight. Some retain the lesson progresses. They accept good grace that life pushes them. From there. The attitude of this small number of people means that they have the will and the need to learn something. They learn and they continue to advance. Most of the others give up, but some, like you, fight. Rich Father got up and went to close an old, squeaky wood window that had an urgent need to be repaired. If you learn this lesson, you will become a rich and happy wise young man. If you do not give up, you will spend your whole life blaming your work, your meager salary, or your boss for your problems. You will live your life in the hope that an incredible chance come to solve all your money problems. Rich Father suddenly looked at me to check if I always listened. His eyes met mine. We both stared at, and a strong current of communication is established between us by means of our looks. Finally, I turned my eyes away, after having grasped his last message. I knew that he was right. I had blamed him, and yet I really wanted to learn. I was torn. Rich Father continued. On the other hand, if you are the kind of person who has no heart in the belly, you will give up every time that life will upset you. If this is your case, you will spend your whole life to risk nothing, to lead you honorably, to spare yourself in anticipation of any event that will never happen. Then you will die like a boring old man, will have a bunch of friends who will really have you after writing because you were such a nice and hard worker, but the truth is this: you will have let your life reduce to submission. Deep down, you were terrified to take risks. You really wanted to win, but the fear of losing was stronger than the excitement of victory. Deep down in your being, you and only you will know that you did not give your maximum to try to achieve it. In the end, you will have chosen to avoid risks 20 years ago. Today, life is a teacher. Today, the children of the millennium are facing a harsh reality. Jobs are harder to find, robots replace. Workers by millions, learning by trial and error is more and more important. Learning books are less valuable than what the real world brings. University education is no longer synonymous with a guaranteed job. Our eyes crossed again. You pushed me right and left. Did I not ask some people could perhaps affirm this? Said, smiling Rich Father. For me, I would just tell you that I gave you a sample of life, what taste of life asked. I still angry, but my curiosity was now awake, and I was still ready to learn. Mike and you are the first beings to ask me to teach them how to make money. I have more than 150 employees, and none of them ever asked me what I know about money. He asks me a job and a salary, but never to teach them what I know about money. So most of them will spend the best years of their lives working for money without really understanding why he works. I was sitting there listening carefully, so when Mike told me that you wanted to learn how to make money, I decided to design a course inspired by the real life. I could have spoken and talked, but you wouldn't have understood anything. So I decided to let life push you a little, so that you end up hearing me. That's why I only paid you 10 centler. What is the lesson I learned? Working to say that you are mean, and that you exploit your workers. Rich Kala in his chair and laughing heartily. It would be better if you change your point of view. Stop blaming me, thinking that it is me the problem. If you believe that I am the problem, so it will be necessary that you make me change. If you take it that you're the problem, so you can change yourself. Learn some things and become wiser. Most people want the rest of the world to change, but not themselves. Let me tell you that it's easier to change yourself than to transform anyone else. 20 years ago today. Change what you can change. I exhausted truth and wisdom in the words of my rich father. There are so many things in life that are beyond our control. I learned to focus on what I can master myself, and if things have to change, I have to adapt immediately. I don't understand. I do not blame myself for your problems, says rich father with impatience in the voice. But you only pay me 10 cents, and what do you learn? So ask his. Rich father looks smug, that you are being gravid and petty, say I with a mischievous smile. I see, you think I am the problem, said rich father. You are without a shadow of a doubt, and well, maintain this attitude and you will learn nothing. If you continue to think that I am the problem, what choice is left to you? And well, if you do not pay me more, if you do not show me more respect for me, and if you don't teach me, I'm going to give up. Well said, wealthy father. And that's exactly what most people do. They give up and look for another job with better future prospects and a higher salary, in really thinking that a new job and a better salary will solve the problem. In most cases, this solves nothing. So what will solve the problem is just accepting this miserable disenthrall, smiling rich father, sketching a smile. That's what others do. They just wait for a raise, thinking that more money will solve the problem most of them are content with this check, while others find a second job and work even harder, but still for a meager salary. I was sitting there staring at the floor, and I began to understand the lesson Father Rich explained to me. I felt that it represented a glimpse of life. Finally, I looked up and I say, but what will solve the problem? This says, he leans back and gives me a little pat on the head. This material between your ears. It is at this precise moment that Father Rich shared with me the fundamental principle that distinguished him from his employees and my father, and who later led him to become one of the richest men in Hawaii, while my very educated but poor father struggled all his life financially. 20 years ago today, assets before salary. Acquire or create assets that generate income is to make money work for you. Well-paid jobs means two things. You work for the money, and the taxes you pay will probably increase. I learned to make money work for me, and to benefit from tax advantages because my income is not a salary. Father repeated several times this fundamental principle that I call the first rich lesson. The poor and the middle class work for money. The rich make money work for them. On this sunny Saturday morning, I was learning a principle, a completely different point of view from what my poor father had taught me. At the age of 9, I realized that both my fathers wanted me to learn, both encouraged me to study, but not the same things. My highly educated father advised me to do the same as him, my son. I want you to study with application, that you get good grades in order to find a secure and stable job in a big company, and make sure that the latter offers you excellent benefits. Rich father wanted me to learn the root of money, so that I could put it at my service. I was going to learn his lessons in life, thanks to his advice and not in a classroom. Perrick continued, my first lesson. I am glad you got angry when I made you work to go downhill. If you had not got angry, and if you had accepted all this without saying anything, I would have simply told you that it was impossible for me to teach you. See you, the real learning requires the energy of passion, an ardent desire. Anger is an important part of this formula because the passion represents anger and love fused together. When it comes to money, most people want to avoid risks and feel secure. So, it is not passion that leads them. It is fear. It is for this reason they accept jobs at very low wages. Yes, says Father Rich, some people say I exploit people because I do not pay as much as the cancer plantation or the government. I can assure you that people exploit themselves. It is their fear, not mine, but do you not think you should pay them more? I do not have to do it. Besides, more money does not solve. Don't worry, you just have to think about your father. He makes a lot of money, and he can't even pay his bills most. People, if you give them more money, only manage to get more indebted. So that's the reason for saying smiling, smiling, smiling. It's part of the lesson. It's quite correct. Smiling. Father. See you. Father attended school, and he got an excellent education in order to get a well-paid job. He managed, but he continues to have financial problems because he learned nothing about money in school. And in addition to all this, Working for money is part of his creditor. It's not your case. I didn't really say Father Rich. If you want to learn to work for money, continue to stay in school. A great place to learn to act like this, but if you want to learn to put the money at your service, I will teach you, but only if you really want to learn. 20 years ago, today do studies. Although I am a strong supporter of education and continuing education, doing mainly university studies has become a financial nightmare. Student debts have reached a record high, with 44 million of young Americans who owe close to $1.3 trillion again, trillions with a capital B. Wouldn't everyone like to learn that? I don't say Father Rich, for the simple reason that it's easier to learn to work for money, especially when fear is the first feeling you get when you talk about money. I don't understand, say I'm frowning. Don't worry about this for now. Know only that it's fear that makes most people want to keep their job. The fear of not being able to pay their bill. The fear of being born, said. The fear of not having enough money. The fear of starting from scratch. This is the price to pay when one studies to learn a profession or a trade and then works for the money. Most people become slaves of money. Then they get angry at their boss. Learning to put the money at his service is a completely different program of study. Is it not? Absolutely, answered Father Rich. Absolutely. We remained silent for a few moments. We gorged on Hoenn. Morning. My friends had just started their baseball game, but for some reason, I was now grateful to have made the decision to work Tedendler. I felt I was about to learn something my friends wouldn't learn in school. Are you ready to learn? Asked Father Rich. Absolutely, say I, with a big smile. I kept my promise. I taught you remotely without you realizing it, said Father Rich. At 9 years you already have a glimpse of what it feels like to work for money. Simply multiply your activities of the last month by 50 years, and you will have a good idea of the activities that most people don't learn. People devote to during their whole life. I don't understand, I say, what you felt when he took you a long time to see me the first time to get you hired, and the next time to demand more money. I felt lamentable, say I, what the life of many people looks like when they choose to work for the money, said Rich Father. And what did you feel when Madame Martin dropped 3 10-cent in your hand? For 3 hours of work, I found that it was not enough. It seemed less than nothing. I was disappointed, say I am. And this is what most employees feel when they look at their paycheck. Once all taxes and contributions collected, you at least got 100% of your pay. You mean most workers don't get their full pay? I wonder, God not said. Rich Father, the government always takes its share first. How? By taxes, says Rich Father. When you make money, your salary is taxed. When you spend it, you are taxed. When you save it, you are taxed. When you die, why do people let the government do that the rich don't let themselves, say Rich Father, with a smile on the lips of the poor and the middle class let themselves do? I bet you, I make more money than your father, and yet he pays more taxes. How is it possible? I asked. It made no sense to me why anyone would let the government do this to them. 20 years ago, today, taxes, governments are growing and need more and more money, and the only place they can get it is in the middle class. In the pockets of workers, governments are currently giving privileges to professional investors and owners of those who are the workers, who pay taxes. Investors and business owners pay very little. If they use tax laws as intended, as a tool to ensure the growth of the economy. Father Rich was swinging slowly and silently in his chair while watching me. Are you ready to learn? Asked. I consent with a nod. I already told you a lot to learn. Because to learn to put the money at your service, it requires a teacher that can last a lifetime. Most people attend college for 4 years. Then they end their studies. I know in advance that my study of money will extend throughout my life, because the more I discover things on the subject, the more I discover others that I need to know. Most people never study this subject. They go to work, get their salaries, balance their checkbook. One point, it is all over the Market, they wonder why they have money problems. Then they imagine that more money will solve the problem. Very little realize that the problem results from their lack of financial education. Therefore, if my father has problems of taxes, it is that he does not understand the functioning of the money. Asked I, a bit confused. See, you say Father Rich, taxes are only a small part of this learning. That will tell you how to put the money at your service. Today, I just wanted to realize if you still had this passion to learn the different notions about money. Most people do not share this passion. They want to go to school, learn a profession, have fun at work, and make a lot of money. They wake up one day with big money problems. They then realize that they can no longer afford to stop working. That is the price to pay when the only thing you know how to do is to work for money. Instead of studying to find the means to put the money at his service. So, do you still have the passion to learn from his rich father? I say yes. Very well. Now, pay Rich, go to work. This time I don't pay you anything. What I asked, I'm amazed you heard me. Nothing. You go to work the same 3 hours every Saturday, but this time you won't be paid 10 centler. You told me you wanted to learn, not to work, only for money. So I won't lose you anything. I couldn't believe my ears. I had this same conversation with Mike earlier. He works already. He is marrying to store canned boxes on shelves. You better hurry up and go back there. It's not just screaming. I have to pay me. You said you want to learn. If you don't learn this right now as an adult, you will be like these two women and this old man in my living room. You will work for the money while hoping that I won't fire you, or you will look like your father, who makes a lot of money and still drowns in debts with the hope that a surplus of money will solve the problem. If that's what you want, I will. Go back to our original agreement to disconnect, or you can do what most adults do. They complain that the pay is not enough. He missionize and look for another job. But what should I do? Ask I. Rich father patted me on the head. Yes, you said. He says if you use it wisely, you will thank me soon for giving you a great opportunity, and you will one day become a rich man. I stood there amazed, not to believe, yet this dupe deal of which I had just been the victim. I had come to ask for a raise, and now I was asked to work for nothing. Rich father patted me again on the head, saying, "Use your gray matter. Now get out of here and go back to work." First lesson, the rich don't work for the money. I do not tell my poor father that I was not paid. He would not understand, and I did not want to try to explain something I do not understand. Praise myself again. The following 3 Saturdays, Mike and I worked for 3 hours, without being paid at all. The work did not bother me, and the routine became easier. What disturbed me, however, it was the missed baseball games and the fact of not having the means to buy some comics. The third week Father Rich passed to see us at noon. We heard his truck stopped in the parking lot, and the engine coughed when he cut the contact. He entered the store and greeted Mrs. Martin. After inquiring about the activities in the store, he opened the freezer. We removed 2 tablets of ice cream and gave Mike and me to follow him. Go for a walk, the guys. We crossed the street, avoiding some automobile, and then continued our walk through a large green field where some adults played ball sitting at a table away. He offered us the treats. How it goes, the guys, it says. Mike jast us a nod. Have you learned something so far? Asked my rich father. Mike and I looked at each other's shoulders, and then, in unison, we hung our heads together to avoid one of the greatest blows. Craps of life, and well, guys, you better start. Thinking you are facing one of the greatest lessons of life. If you learn it, you will enjoy a life with immense freedom and security. If you don't take it, you will end up like Mrs. Martin and most people who play ball in this park. They work very hard for little money, clinging to the illusion of job security, anticipating their own 3 weeks of annual holidays and a meager pension after 45 years of service. If it excites you, I will give you a 25 centler increase, but they are good people who work hard. Are you making fun of her? Was I asking for a smile? Appeared on the face of rich father. Mrs. Martin is like a mother to me. I could never be so cruel. I may look inhumane, but I am trying to show you something, to both. I want to widen your horizons so you can distinguish some things that most people never have the chance to see, because their vision is too narrow. Indeed, most of the people never see the trap they fell into. Mike and I sat there, not knowing exactly what he did. Meant words seemed harsh to us, but we felt he was trying to make us understand an important point, sporting a smile. P. Richich says, "Will 25 scenes of the hour suit you? It makes your heart beat a little faster." I nodded no. But in fact, my heart beat fast. 25 centel, that was a lot of money for me. Agree. I will pay you $1 an hour, said Rich Father with a mischievous smile. Suddenly, my heart started to beat. My brain was screaming, accepted. I couldn't believe my ears. Yet, I say nothing. Good deal. $2 an hour. To these words, my little heart and my little brain exploded almost. After all, we were in 1956, and a salary of $1 an hour would make me the richest child in the world. I couldn't imagine making such a sum. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to close the deal. I already saw a new bicycle, a new baseball glove, and the respect of my friends when I show my money. On top of all that, Jimmy and his rich comrades could never treat me again poor now. But for some reason, I was silent. The ice cream had melted and flowed along my hand. Father Rich observed the two boys, who also stared at him with eyes wide open and the brain empty. He knew that he was testing us, and he also knew that part of this emotional being in us wanted to accept this deal. He knew that every human being has in his soul a weak and pitiful element that can be bought. He knew that every human being also has in his soul a strong component that can never be bought. It was simply a matter of knowing which part was the strongest component of the $5 deal. Suddenly I became silent. The rules of the game had changed. The offer was much too generous and became ridiculous. There were not many adults in 1956 who earned more than $5 an hour. The temptation of winning quickly disappeared, and a serene lull settled in me. I slowly turned to my left to watch Mike. He, in turn, looked at me. The part of my soul that was weak and pitiful, killing itself. The other part that had no price, and that one could not buy the prevail. I knew Mike had reached the same conclusion. Well said, slower, Father Rich. Most people have a price, and they have a price because of the human emotions called fear and greed. First, the fear of being without money motivates us to work hard. And then, when we get our pay, greed or desire makes us think of all these wonders that money can buy. Packaging. Then what? Packaging, did I ask? The one to get up to go to work. Pay bills to get up again to go to work. Pay bills. From then on, people's lives are governed by two emotions, fear and greed. Offer there more money, and they perpetuate the cycle by also increasing their expenses. This is what I call the free-for-all or the gear-up. Is there another way to act? Asked Mike. Told him slowly, Rich Father. But few people know her. And what is this way? Asked Mike. This is what you will discover, hopefully, by working and studying with me. This is why I excluded any form of remuneration. Can you give us any clues? Father asked Mike. We have more broken from working hard, especially for nothing. And well, the first step is to tell the truth, said Rich Father. We did not lie. I did not say you lied. I just said to tell the truth, Father Rich replied. The truth about what? I asked. About what you feel, says Father Rich. You don't have to tell it to anyone else, only to recognize it for yourself. You mean that the people who are in this park, and the people who work for you, like Mrs. Martin, do not act like this, I doubt, said Father Rich. Instead, they feel the fear of not having money, and they do not logically confront it. They react emotionally instead of using their judgment, says Father Rich. Then, when they grab some posts of the emotions of joy, of desire, and greed take over, again and again they react before even thinking. So their emotions control their brain, says Mike. It's just, said Rich Father, instead of admitting the truth about what they feel, they react to their own feelings and fail to think they feel fear. They go to work hoping that money will soothe fear, but it doesn't work. This old fear H, and he goes back to work hoping once again that money will calm all their fear, and again it does not work. The PR fear trapped to work, the money gains of work, earnings of money while hoping that fear will disappear. But every day he rises and this old fear wakes up with them. This old fear keeps awakening every night. Millions of agitated and worried people. Then they get up to work and hope that their salary will wipe out this fear that gnaws at their soul. The money leads their life, and he refuses to tell the truth about this. Money controls their emotions and consequently their soul. 20 years ago today, the main fear as the world population ages and more people head to retirement, it has been established that their main fear is about the money. Nearly 50 years ago, 0% of the people interviewed fear not to survive their savings from running out of money during their golden age. Rich Father remained silent. We let his message internalize. Mike and I had heard what he said, but we did not fully understand what he was talking about. All I knew was that I often wondered why adults hurry to work. It didn't seem very fun, and he never seemed very happy, but something pushed them to do it. When Rich Father realized that we had absorbed most of his message, he tells us, "I want you to avoid my boys. This trap is really what I want to teach you, and not only to become rich, because being rich does not solve the problem," really asked. I really surprised. Let me explain the other emotion, desire. Some call it greed, but I prefer the word desire. It is quite normal to desire something better, more beautiful, more fun, or thrilling. Therefore, people also work for money because of desire. They want money for the joy they think they can buy, but the joy that the money brings is often short-term, and soon they need more money to get more of pleasure, of safety, comfort. Then they continue to work thinking that money will appease their troubled by fear and desire. But money cannot play this role. Is the same for rich people, asked Mike. Including rich people, said Rich Father. Actually, several rich have become it not because of desire, but because of fear. They really think that money can eliminate this fear of no more money and being poor. Therefore, they have stood out. But they realize one day that fear is getting bigger. They are now afraid of losing this money. I have friends who continue to work, even if they have some more than enough. I know of millionaires who are even more afraid now than when they were poor. They are terrified of losing all their money. The fears that cause them to become rich are more intense than before. In reality, the weak and painful part of their soul screams even louder. They do not want to lose the big houses, cars, and the worldly life that the money provided them. They worry about what their friends would say if they ever lost all their money. Several are desperate and emotionally neurotic. Even if they look rich and have more money, then a poor man, is he happier? No, I don't think, he replied, Father Rich. To avoid money is just as foolish as to attach himself too much to it. Just at the right time, the local vagabond passed by our table. He stopped in front of a big trash and searched inside. We looked at him all three with great interest, while a few weeks before, we probably would have ignored. Father Rich withdrew $1 from his wallet and waved to the old man. Citing the money, the vagabond immediately approached the ticket, thanked Father Rich with profusion, and went away delighted of his lucky stroke. He is not very different from most of my employees, says Father Rich. I met so many people who say, oh, money doesn't interest me. However, they spend 8 hours a day doing their job. It's called deny the truth. If money doesn't interest them, then why does he work? This way of thinking is probably more unbalanced than that other person who raises money, sitting there listening to Father Rich. I was thinking about the many times my own father said, money does not interest me. He often uttered these words. He also justified himself, saying, always, I work because I love my profession. Then what do we have to do? Not working for money, until all traces of fear and greed disappear. No, it would be a waste of time. Said Pericich, the emotions make us human. They make us real. The word emotion means energy in motion. Be sincere about your emotions, and use them as well as your mind, to your advantage, and not to your detriment. A moment, said Mike. Don't break your head with what I just said. You will see clearer in a few years. Observe and study your emotions, rather than react to them. Most people do not know that it is their emotions that think in their place. Your emotions are your emotions, but you have to learn to think for yourself. Can you give me an example? Asked I. Of course, replied Father Rich. When a person says, I have to find work, there is a strong chance that it is an emotion that thinks in its place. The fear of not having money provokes this thought. But people really need money when they have bills to pay. I certainly say, Father Rich, smiling. I just say that it is too often fear that thinks in our place. I do not understand, said Mike. For example, said Father Rich, if the fear of not having enough money comes forward, we could perhaps ask the following question. Instead of rushing either to find a job will be the best solution to eliminate this long-term fear. In my opinion, the answer is no. A job is really a short-term solution to a long-term problem. But my father always says, keep going to school and get good grades so you can one day find a job SR and stable. Dare I say a little confused? Yes, I understand that they say that, said Father Rich, smiling. Most people recommend it, and it is a good idea to do it for the majority of them. But this recommendation is mainly based on fear. You mean that my father says that because he is afraid? Yes, Father Rich, he is terrified that you are not able to make money and that you cannot integrate into society. Understand me well. He loves you and he acts in your best interests. A good education and jobs are important, but it will not solve the fear. Do you see this fear that forces him to get up in the morning to earn a few dollars, and this same fear that he makes him so fanatical about your attendance at school 20 years ago? Today, the control of money, with the appearance of financial derivatives, and an increasingly complex economy, the control of money has become essential to survival. With low interest rates and an uncertain stock market, old adages about saving and long-term investing no longer make sense. So what do you recommend? I want you to master the power of money, not to be afraid of it. This is a subject that you are not taught in school. If you do not learn this lesson, you will become slaves of money. We suddenly began to better understand what he said. He wanted us to expand our field of view so that we could see what the Martin ladies of this world could not see. To examples that seemed ruthless to us at the time. But I have never forgotten them. My vision widens that day, and I could see the trap that awaited most people. See, you are all employees. Finally, we just work at different levels, says Father Rich. I just want you to have the possibility to avoid the trap that tend the two emotions that are fear and desire. Use it to your advantage and not against yourself. This is what I want to teach you. I am not interested to teach you only to make a fortune. It will not solve fear or desire. If you do not learn first, solving the problem of fear and desire, and you get rich, you will only be very well-paid slaves. So, how can we avoid the trap? Asked I. The main cause of poverty or financial problems is fear and ignorance. It is not the economy, the government, or the rich. It is fear and ignorance, inflicted on oneself, that traps people in a trap. So the guys go to school and get your higher education degrees. I will teach you how to avoid falling into this trap. The pieces of the puzzle put in place. My highly educated father had a lot of education and a great career, but the school had never taught him how to manage his money or his fear of money. It seemed obvious to me that my two fathers could teach me things, both different and important. Fathers, you talked about the fear of not having money. How the desire to have money affects our way of thinking, asked Mike. How did you feel when I made you shine the possibility of a salary increase? Did you notice an increase in your desires? We shudder in not yielding to your emotions. It allowed you to delay your reaction and to think. This is very important. We will always feel emotions of fear and golden greed before it. It will be imperative that you use these emotions long-term and in your own interest, and that you do not let your emotions lead you by the nose and control your thinking. Most people use fear and greed against M. This is how ignorance sets in, little by little. Most people spend their lives running after salary, failure increases, and job security because of these emotions that are called desire and fear, without really asking where the inspired thoughts lead them by emotion. One can compare this to a donkey pulling a cart, while his master lets hang a carrot just above his muzzle. It is very possible that the owner of the A goes where he wants to go, but the donkey on his side pursues an illusion. Tomorrow, the same manager will start again, and the donkey will have to settle for another illusory carrot. You mean that from the moment I imagine a new baseball glove of sweets and toys, it is the same as the carrot for the donkey? Asked Mike. Yes, and as aging, your toys are much more expensive. A new one. So a boat and a big house to impress your friends, says rich father with a smile. Fear pushes you outside your home, and desire solicits you, is the trap. What is the answer to this situation? Sankey Mike. Fear and desires are amplified by ignorance. That is why rich people with tons of money often feel even more fear as their wealth grows. Money is the carrot, the illusion. If the year could really understand the ploy, he would think twice before starting to run after the carrot. P. Rich Enchained, explaining that human life is a real one, the struggle between ignorance and light. He made us understand that from the moment a person ceases to be in search of information and knowledge about himself, ignorance settles this struggle, is a choice of every moment. It is about learning to open his mind or to make the decision to close it. See you, the school is very important. You go to school to learn a technique or a profession to become a full member of society. All cultures need teachers of mechanics. Here, artists of cooks, business people, police officers of soldiers. The schools train them so that our culture may prosper and flourish, says Father Rich. Unfortunately for many people, school means an end in itself and not a beginning. He had a long silence. Father Rich smiled. I did not understand everything he said that day, but in the way of most great educators, these words continue to teach us for years. I was a little cruel today, said Father Rich. I want you to remember always this conversation. I want you to remember always Mrs. Martin and the donkey. Never forget that. Fear and desire can lead you into the worst trap of life if you are not conscious that they can control your thinking. It would be atrocious to spend your whole life in fear without ever exploring your dreams. Working hard for money, thinking that this one will allow you to buy things that will make you happy, is also cruel. Waking up terrified in the middle of the night because you have to pay bills is also a horrible way to live a life that depends entirely on the amount of money written on a salary check is not really a life. Think that a job will secure you is lying to yourself. It is inhuman, and this is the trap I want you to avoid, if possible. I have seen how money governs people's lives. Please watch that it doesn't happen to you. Please don't let the money control your life. A ball rolled under the rich father table, picked it up, and revived it. What does ignorance have to do with greed and fear? I asked. It's the ignorance about money that causes greed and fear, said rich father. Let me give you some examples. When a doctor wants more money to better support his family, he increases his fees by making medical services more expensive for all and everyone. In fact, hurts before, so all the poor, these people have worse health than the people who had money 20 years ago. Today, income inequality during his presidential campaign. In 2016, Governor Bernie Sanders declared income and wealth inequality is the biggest moral crisis facing Americans today. As doctors increase their fees, lawyers do the same with the fees of lawyers who have been increased. Teachers then want a raise in salary, which will drive our taxes up, and so sooner or later, it will widen a gap so dreadful between rich and poor that the chastisement we will settle, and another great civilization will collapse. History proves that great civilizations collapsed when the gap between rich and poor was too great. Unfortunately, America is on the same way, because we do not remember the lessons of history. We only memorize the dates and historical characters and not the lessons it teaches. The prices are not, they sense it, is increased, asked I. In an enlightened and well-governed society, prices should drop. Of course, too often, it is true that in theory, prices rise because of the greed and fear it breeds ignorance. If schools taught people the basics of money, it would generate more money and lower prices. But schools only teach people to work for money and not to exploit the power of money. But do we not have high business schools? Asked. Do you not encourage me to do my MBA? Yes, says Father Rich, but too often, business schools train employees as sophisticated as calculating machines. God forbid, a calculator takes over a company. This kind of employee only verifies numbers, dismiss people, and ruin the company, little by little. I know because I engage from these machines to calculate these subordinates. Only think about reducing costs and raising prices, which causes even more problems. Calculate is important. I wish more people are aware, but the calculation itself is only one facet of the whole picture. Add Father Rich with anger. Is there an answer? Asked Mike. Yes, said Father Rich. Learn to use your emotions to think, and not to think with your emotions. When both you manage to control your emotions by agreeing to work without being paid, I knew there was hope. When you controlled your emotions again, when I tempted you by offering you more money, you have once again learned to think, despite the fact that you were very tense emotionally. This is the first step. Why this step is so important? Asked. It is up to you to discover the guys. If you really want to learn, I will take you along the trail surrounded by brass, in this place that almost everyone avoids. I will lead you to this place where most people are afraid to go. If you come with me, you will abandon the idea of working for the money, and would rather take you. To put the money at your service, Trail of Ron's is there, he asked. I say yes, Parridge. The Trail of Ron's is our fear and greed. To get by, we have to examine our fears by choosing our thoughts. By choosing our thoughts, asked Mike, confused. Yes, we have to choose what will furnish our thoughts instead of reacting to our emotions, rather than just going to work to solve your problems. That fear of not having enough money to pay your bills, make you anxious thinking, would allow you to take the time to ask yourself this question. Is working harder the best solution to this problem? Most people are so terrified that this fear has control over them, and they feel unable to think rationally and flee. That's what I mean when I talk to you about choosing your thoughts, and how we're going to go about it, asked Mike. That's what I'm going to teach you. I'm going to teach you to consider a broad choice of thought, rather than to react instinctively, as someone who swallows his morning coffee and hurriedly crosses the threshold of his house 20 years ago today. Emotions and intelligence. I'm constantly trying to exercise control over my thoughts and emotions. I've been witness all my life when emotions take over, the intelligence goes to sleep. Remember that I already have a job is only a short-term solution. A long-term problem, most people have in mind only one problem and short-term. It is the bills at the end of the month. The money leads their life, or to be more precise, it is their fear and ignorance about the money that leads them so. They do what their parents did before them. They get up every morning, and if they go to work for the money, they do not even have time to ask themselves the following question. Is there another way to act? Their emotions now control their thoughts, but not their head, their brain. Can you explain us the difference between emotional thinking and rational thinking? Asked Mike. Ah, yes. I notice every day this difference when I hear things like this from super rich and everyone has to work, or even the rich are, SCRC, or I will find another job, I deserve this increase, you cannot walk on my feet, or else, I like this job because it is stable, I will prefer to hear, am I missing something? Such a sentence interrupts the emotional thinking and gives you time to think clearly, while we would go back to the per-rich store and explain that the rich were really making money, they were not at the service of money. He went on to explain that Mike and I had been very close to the mentality of the rich when we had melted QC coins from these templons while being convinced that we were making money. The problem was the following. It was illegal for us to do so. It was legal for the government and the banks to do it, but not for us. He explained to us that there were legal and illegal ways to make money. Rich Father then told us that the people, the rich, know very well that money is an illusion, just as the carrot for the year. It is only under the blow of fear and greed that the illusion of money is perpetuated through billions of people who think that money is real. Money is really a creation of every piece. It is only because of the ignorance of the masses and their illusory trust that the house of cards has not yet collapsed. It then spoke of the gold standard that America adopted, and it tells us that each dollar note was actually a certificate in money. It worried about the rumor that America would one day abandon the gold standard and our dollars would no longer be supported by something palpable. When that happens, the guy's hell will fall on our heads. The poor, middle class, and the incompetent will ruin their lives for the simple reason that they will continue to believe that the money is real and that the government and the company they work for will take care of them. We really did not understand what he said that day, but these words all took their meaning over the years to see what others do not see. As he climbed into his truck outside of his grocery store, he tells us, keep working, guys. But the sooner you forget your need to earn a salary, the easier it will make your adult life. Continue to use your gray matter of working for free, and soon your intelligence will tell you ways to earn money far beyond what I could afford to pay you. You will see things that other people never see. Most people do not see these opportunities because they only seek money and security. That is why they only get this from. The moment you really discern what an opportunity is, you will be able to see all the others for the rest of it. Your life, from the moment you pass this step, I will teach you something else. Remember well what I just told you, and you will avoid one of the worst traps of life. Mike and I went to pick up our things in the store and greeted Mrs. Martin. We returned to the park. We sat on the same bench, and we spent several hours thinking and conversing in school. The reflection and conversation occupied most of the following week. For another 2 weeks, we continued to think of talking and working for free. At the end of the second Saturday, I greeted Mrs. Martin again, and I watched the comic book presentation with a glance ignited by envy. It was very painful for me not to have money to buy me comics, since I didn't even win 30 scenes a sudden Saturday while Mrs. Martin greeted us, Mike, and I saw her accomplish a task that I had never seen him do before. Mrs. Martin was cutting the cover page of a comic book in half. She kept the top half of the cover and threw the rest of the strip into a big cardboard box. When I asked her what she did with the comics, she told me, I get rid of it. I put the top half of the cover back to the cover distributor to get a credit. When he brings new tape, he has to pass in an hour. Mike and I waited for an hour. The distributor arrived shortly after, and I asked him if we could get the comics that Mrs. Martin had cut off part of their cover, the latter and the next line. You can take them if you are at the service of this store, and if you do not resell them, our association was reborn. There was at Mike's a room overrun in the basement that no one was using. We started to pile up hundreds of comics there. Shortly after, our comic book library was accessible to the public. We hired the young sister of the comic. Mike loved to study as a librarian. She charged 10 scenes as an entrance fee to each child for the library. which was open from 2:30 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. every day after school. Clients who were actually the neighborhood children could read as many comics as they wanted for 2 hours. It was a real good, since each comic cost 10 cents. They had plenty of time to read 5, or if in the 2-hour PSEs, Mike's sister watched the children when he left the library to make sure he didn't borrow any comic book. She also kept a record of the number of children who presented each day, their names and their various comments. Mike and I did on average 9.50 per week over a period of 3 months. We gave her sister $1 a week, and we allowed her to read the comics for free, which she rarely did, since she was constantly studying. Mike and I respectable our agreement by working at the grocery store every Saturday and picking up all the comic books from other stores. We also respected our agreement with the distributor by not selling any comics. We burned them when they were too torn. We tried souls to open a branch, but we smoked, unable to find someone else as dedicated as Mike's sister in whom we could have trusted. Early in life made us realize how difficult it was to surround ourselves with good staff. 3 months after the opening of the library, a battle broke out when little hardliners from another neighborhood forced their way into the room. Mike's father suggested we close our comic business, so we closed it, and we stopped working Saturdays at the grocery store anyway. Rich father was all excited because he had new things to us teaching. He was happy because we had very well assimilated our first lesson. We had learned to put money at our service, no longer being paid for our work at the store we smoked, forced to use our imagination to find a way to make money by creating our own business. The comic book library, we controlled our own finances, and we were not dependent on one of the most extraordinary employers in this story is that our company generated money even when we were not present in person. Our money worked for us 20 years ago. Today, the power of the imagination, in the air of the information, and the internet of millions. People under the age of 30 enrich themselves by using their imagination to create world-changing apps, from Facebook to Uber to Snapchat and others. People who have imagination thrive, and those who do not are still looking for a job that robots and technology could soon delight them, instead of paying us in money. Father Rich had brought us much more. Study Session Chapter 1, Lesson 1, The Rich Do Not Work for Money. Summarized at age 9, Robert Kiyosaki and his childhood friend were not invited to a classmate's country house because they were poor children. When he told his poor father, a teacher who made a good living, but who always had trouble making ends meet, he told him he had to learn how to make money, and that is what his friend Mike and he did. They put together a large number of empty toothpaste tubes, which at the time and were made of lead. They melted, and using casting plaster, they made fake 5-cent coins. They were quickly called to order by Robert's father, which he advised them to speak with Mike's father. He had never finished his 8th grade, but he ran several successful businesses. Mike's father, the wealthy father mentioned in the title of this book, agreed to become their teacher, but on his terms. He made them work for 3 hours every Saturday morning in one of his grocery stores, married, and put canned cans on shelves. He paid them 10 cents, and Robert usually spent a third of his salary to buy a comic book. Robert was quickly disillusioned by this boring work and the low salary. When he told his friend that he would resign, Mike told him that his father had him said and that he had to go and talk to him. Robert's father was a teacher and used sermon, but Mike's father was a man of few words and taught not in the same way. What Robert would soon discover, the following Saturday morning, Robert went to see Mike's father, but he made him wait in a dark living room that smelled like he was enclosing him. He was smoking with anger and very emotional when he was finally able to express his grievances to Mike's father, accusing him of being a miser who exploited the children and did not respect them. When he told him that he had not taught him anything in spite of their agreement, the business owner calmly expressed his disagreement. Rich father explained to him that life does not teach with words, but that it pushes us. Some people let themselves pushed by the life. Others get angry and pushing their bosses or their loved ones, but still others learn the lesson and accept good graces that life pushes them from C because they need to learn something. Those who do not learn this lesson spend their whole life blaming everyone, waiting for a miracle where he decides not to take a risk and fear to lose. He told Robert that he and Mike were the first people to ask him to inform him how to make money. He had more than 150 employees, and although they had applied for a job, he had never asked him to give them the knowledge that Mike and he wanted to acquire. So Father Rich had decided to design a course inspired by the real world and let life push the boys a little bit. Robert asked him what lessons he had learned, apart from the fact that he was mean and exploited his workers. Father Rich defended himself by saying that the majority of people blame others, when in fact it is their attitude. "What is the problem?" Robert asked him. What could solve the problem? His brain told him Mike's father. He wanted Robert to understand how money works so that he could get him to work for him. He was glad Robert got angry, because anger and love combine create passion, a key formula of learning. Money does not solve people's problems. Did he follow many very well-paid individuals still struggle with financial problems, like Robert's poor father? Because they do not know how to put the money at their service. He said that the emotions Robert had experienced working for a salary, disappointment, and the feeling that it wasn't enough, was the feeling he would have throughout his life if he didn't learn from this lesson. He exposed to Robert the concept of taxes, explaining to him that the poor and the middle class allowed the government to tax their wages, what the rich didn't let do. He asked if he still had the passion to learn. When Robert signaled that yes, Rich father told him to return to work, but that this time he wouldn't lose it. He told Robert to use his head to understand the reason. Robert and Mike worked without pay for 3 weeks on Saturday 3rd. Mike's father took them for a walk and asked them if they had learned anything so far. They waved no. He then told them that if he did not learn this lesson, he would be like most people who work hard all their lives for little money. He offered them 25 centaires, but they refused. He then offered them $1 an hour, and then $2. Robert remained silent, despite a final offer of $5 an hour, a chunky sum at that time. Robert concluded that one could not buy Father Rich, said it was good that he did not have a price. Most people have one, that their lives are governed by fear and greed. The fear of being without money motivates them to work hard to get a paycheck. But when they receive this money, greed prompts them to think about everything they could buy. They then need more money, and they also increase their expenses. That is what Father Richer was doing at the show, In Hand or the Gear. He told the boy that the first step was to tell the truth about how he felt too many people react emotionally instead of using their judgment. They are afraid to admit that money leads their lives, and so money controls their soul. It's not just the poor who are facing this fear. The rich too are often terrified. He wanted to teach the boys that wealth alone does not solve the problem. School is important, he told them, but for many people, it's an end in itself and not a beginning. The boys had first to learn to use their emotions to think and not to think with their emotions. They had to learn to choose their thought. He told them to keep an eye open and stay on the lookout for ways to make money. From the moment you really discern what is a great opportunity, you'll be able to see all the others for the rest of your life. That's what we do, the boys. And soon after, they saw an opportunity and created a library where the children paid an entrance fee and could read as many comics as they wanted in 2 hours of the comics unsold by the boys. Grocery store that otherwise would have been returned to the distributor. They made interesting profits, and everything went well for 3 months, until a battle broke out in the library, and he was forced to close their doors. But they had learned the first lesson, which is to put the money at their service, even if they weren't present in person. They were ready to continue their learning, and Mike's father was ready to teach them all. Appeal to the left hemisphere. Despite a very well-paid job, individuals such as Robert's poor father have difficulty to close the ends of months. Appeal to the right hemisphere. Comics destined for destruction lead to a business opportunity thanks to a new and creative perspective. Appeal to the subconscious. People leave fear and greed govern their life. That Robert said. The time to reflect. Ask yourself what Robert says in this quote, and why does he say this here? It matters whether you agree or not with Robert. The goal is to understand what he said. Remember that this study session is conceived as an interactive exercise. 2 heads better than 1. If you do not understand what Robert says, do not hesitate to ask for help. Take the time to discuss each quote until you understand it. The poor and middle class work for money. The rich make money work for them. Life pushes us all, right and left. Some abandon, others fight. Some hold the lesson and progress. They graciously accept that life pushes them from C to there. Stop blaming me, thinking about it as long as I'm the problem. If you think I'm the problem, then you're going to have to make me change. If you realize you're the problem, then you can change yourself. Learn some things and become wiser when it comes to money. So most people want to avoid risks and feel secure, so it's not the passion that drives them, it's the fear. Most people, if you give them more money, only manage to get into more debt. It's the fear that makes most people want to keep their job. The fear of not being able to pay their bill. The fear of being fired. The fear of being fired. Not having enough money. The fear of starting from scratch is the price to pay. When you study to learn a profession or trade and then work for money, most people become slaves of money. Then they get angry with their boss. Most people do not know that it is their emotions that think for them. A job is really a short-term solution for a long-term problem. You can compare it to a donkey pulling a cart while his master lets hang a carrot just above his snout. It is quite possible that the owner of the axe goes where he wants to go, but the donkey, for its part, pursues an illusion. Tomorrow the same merry-go-round will start again, and the ant will have to settle for another illusory carrot. Additional questions. It is now time to apply to your life the content of this chapter and your understanding of what Robert says. Ask yourself the following questions and discuss it with your study partner. Show honesty if some of the answers you give do not please. Ask yourself if you are ready to change and accept the challenge of a change of mentality. To what extent the perception that Robert's poor father has money is representative of the population in general. 2. The rich father of Robert. That true learning requires energy, passion, and a yearning when it happened in your life. Give examples. Which lesson in particular have you never forgotten and why? 3. Would the salary rate of Dissentler and then nothing at all have provoked in you the same reaction as in Robert? 4. Is it the fear that drives the majority of people to work? Other factors come into play. 5. Is the temptation strong to think that money will dispel this fear? Why this reaction is so common? 6. Give an example of a time when you let your emotions take over, and another where you have choose your thoughts. 7. Who, rich or poor, are most sensitive to this outpouring of emotion made of fear and greed? Why 8. Do you believe that most people are aware of being trapped in the free-for-all? Why, dear listeners, I hope you like the book. You can read the full version by following the link in the description. We wish you all the best and hope that our books will change your life for the better.